Okay, thanks for attending the Thai DC GovCon 2020. We had an amazing last 2 days and continuing on the third day today. And I am Shiva Tirumulusai, Thai DC board member. I have the unique opportunity and honor in introducing Fireside chat speakers. Mark Broderick is Senior Vice President and Private Client Advisor in Bank of America Private Bank. And he oversees strategic development delivery of private banks, private wealth management services to high net worth individuals, families, and family foundations, and so on. And also non-profit organizations, but not-for-profit organizations. And another unique, interesting match I saw between Mark and Deepak is both have served in multiple boards in the universities, actually, like Mark being experience in George Mason, Temple University, Emory, and George Washington University. And Mark will be posting the questions to Deepak, and our speaker, Deepak Ethrani, the co-founder and executive chairman of Steel Harbor Capital Partners. Deepak is previously, this is a real estate investment management firm focused on middle market strategic equity. Previously, Deepak exited, sold his company in 2018 as a successful exit. And also, even before Vistronics, he has sold another company, went to an IPO and exited. And another interesting part about Mark is, about Deepak is on the George Mason University, University of Texas, and Northern Virginia Technical Council also. That's pretty broader experience and both on the commercial and nonprofit side of it, actually. So, and let me ask Mark to start. Let's start the conversation on the Fireside chat. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Shiva, and the Thai DC board for inviting Deepak and I to lead this important conversation around exits. Proper advanced planning is a crucial but often overlooked step for many business owners. My Bank of America private bank partner, Uday Shah, and I run a team of specialists dedicated to advise business owners through the exit planning process. Today's conversation will showcase an example of a well-executed exit from one of the most well-respected people in the industry. Let's get started. Deepak, most of us are familiar with your many successes. For those who are not, can you take a few minutes on your background?
Thank you very much, Mark, and good afternoon, everybody. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Thai DC board for giving me this opportunity to be part of this panel discussion. And it's a pleasure to be here. And just a brief background on myself. Came to the country in '83, went to school at the University of Texas at Austin, looked specifically for a startup in the high-tech space where I was for about 3 years before we had an exit to a publicly traded company. Came to the DC metro area and worked for a private equity-backed technology company, which had a public offering. And then I was fortunate enough to start a company called Vistronics back in 1990, had it for 26 years, and was fortunate enough to have an exit in 2016. So that's a brief intro.
Very good, thank you. We will focus on Vistronics for today's conversation. Let us begin with exit planning for the company, and then we'll talk about exit planning for your family. So you started Vistronics in 1990, and the transaction took place in 2016. What year did you begin preparing the company for the event, and what steps did you take?
Thank you, Mark. So before I go into that, I just want to share with the audience that any points or discussions I raise, please consult your tax attorney, your estate planning attorney, or your CPA before implementing any of these. I'm not giving any tax advice today. Then let me give you an example of what happens when you don't plan. I recently had a friend a colleague actually, who had a very successful exit. And unfortunately, they did not plan effectively from an estate and a tax planning perspective. And unfortunately, he will have a very hefty tax bill because of a lack of planning. My point in that is that planning from a tax and estate perspective, is a continuous process, and you need to start early. In our case at Vistronics, we started well early because we had a stock option plan in place, and we started our estate and tax planning in the 2000 timeframe, at least 15 years prior to the potential exit. And we did a number of things that I think proved very beneficial in the exit. And that planning was instrumental in putting the plan in place and then executing it going forward.
So as it relates to pre-planning for the company, which advisors did you rely upon most when preparing for the sale?
Sure. So I think it's, in my case or in our case, or in generally every case, there are generally 3 or 4 different elements to it. There is the tax planning perspective, there is the estate planning perspective, there is the wealth planning perspective, and then there's your personal legacy or charitable perspective. And I think all 4 of those have to intersect. When we started doing that in the 2000s, we did a number of things to prepare for an exit because we knew that would eventually happen. It is a continuous process, and interacting with all 4 of those parties, including your family, and keeping them informed is instrumental in working the plan, developing the plan, and executing the plan.
Very good. So tell us a little bit about how you involved your family and the steps that you took to engage them in the process.
Sure. When we started the process, our children were fairly young and they were minors, and so they weren't involved initially. But my wife was involved from the very beginning in the process of understanding what our family long-term goals are, what the long-term goals of the company are, was involved in interacting and selecting the estate planning attorney, the wealth management firm, and our CPA. So she was very involved in the process. As I mentioned, it is a continuous process. And as we continued executing the estate and the tax planning strategies, as our kids became adults, we got them involved in the process. And now they're very involved in the process on an annual basis, and we believe in full transparency, because in the event that something unforeseen happens to me and my wife or me, that they know exactly what the plan is and where it is, and are familiar with our estate planning attorney, our wealth advisor, and our CPA.
So I'm hearing you say you began this planning process 10 to 15 years in advance. What got you started?
Fortunately, I had been through a couple of exits before. I had friends who had been through exits before, and through their astute advice and their recommendations, I started the process early, because it's never too early to start the process. It's very unfortunate for those who don't start it and have a huge tax bill at the end. But if you plan for it, you can very effectively manage your taxes and your estate to the best of your desires, including achieving your personal objectives from a charitable perspective, from an endowment perspective, or from a foundation perspective.
And so you got some advice, you had guidance, you've been through it before, you were set. Tell us a little bit about some of the people that worked with you in the company. Did you help them along the way? Were they involved? And what kind of communication did you have with them?
Sure. So in our perspective, I felt it was extremely important that whatever planning we do also has a positive impact for the employees who had equity in the company. We had a stock option plan very early in the process. We ensured that the stock option plan was designed so that it could be very favorable to the employees, and the individuals who had significant equity were involved in the process. From the corporate perspective, it was fully transparent. They knew exactly what was going on and when it was going on. And I encouraged them to do whatever necessary planning they had to do for making it as tax efficient as possible. We did a number of things that turned out to be very beneficial in the end. Initially, we gifted a lot of our stock by moving it out of our estate at a very low basis into various different trusts. We did a lot of jurisdiction planning from a state level tax perspective. We did a installment sale at the end of the transaction, which proved to be very beneficial from a tax planning perspective. And the CPAs we worked with a couple of years later after the transaction found additional ways to recover funds from taxes paid, which was something we hadn't planned for, but turned out to be very positive also. And all of this came about by working very closely with our wealth advisor and our estate planning attorney, who encouraged us to look at different structures and walked us through the process of why and what the implications were of each of those structures till we implemented one of those.
And let me pick on something that you just said earlier. You said that is a constant process. And is this something that you evaluate on an annual basis, semi-annual basis? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, it is a constant process for a number of different reasons. One is your personal situation changes. Two, your external environment changes. Three, there are changes in laws. And fourth, the markets change. So I think it's a constant process on looking at your estate plan, your tax plan, and your strategies, both from a charitable and a giving perspective. We have a family discussion on an annual basis. We work with our wealth advisors on a quarterly basis, and with our CPA and estate planning attorney on an annual basis. So it's a constant process.
Well, and I think that's probably the first takeaway from today's conversation. The first, number one, how soon you started the process, and your constant reevaluation, and those three stools, the three legs of the stool between your wealth advisor, your CPA, and your attorney. Having all of those three functions, looking out for your best interest as you progress, is so very important. When it comes to the planning with Vestronics, did you do anything special or unique in the years in anticipation of the event happening?
Yeah, we did. Like I mentioned, we did a number of things that were fairly unique, which I thought which financially proved very beneficial in the end. We were an S corp from the very beginning, on a cash basis S corp. And recognizing the benefits of being an S corp in a transaction, we did a number of things to protect the S corp. Even though we made a number of acquisitions, we structured it in such a way that we protected the S corp right to the very end. That was one. The second thing we did is, I personally did, is I did a defective sale of stock into a trust. That was very beneficial. And the third and the most important thing I think that worked out very well is the installment sale we did at the transaction time. That proved to be very effective during the transaction process. So those were I would say the top three things that we did from an estate and a wealth planning perspective.
And so, looking back at the process, which was over 10 plus years of planning, the event happened, and now you moved on to other ventures. What changes would you have made, or looking back on it, would you have done anything differently?
Would I have done anything differently? That's a good question, Mark. I think we made it as tax and wealth efficient as possible. My only recommendation was start the process early, select advisors who know you, know your family, know your objectives, who are recommended to you through your personal networks, who have a good track record. And the one recommendation is align your portfolio with your long-term objectives. It's not the highest return, but it's the best risk-adjusted return from a investment perspective. And work with people who you know and trust. Selecting trustees for the trust is very important. Putting a trust in place is I think a necessary step and a difficult step. Difficult in the sense that it forces you to think of questions that one does not address in day-to-day life, such as if your kids are minors and you and your wife are involved in a life-threatening incident, who takes care of the kids? How does the wealth get distributed? Those are questions that you're forced to think about, and you should think about it very, very involving your family and your spouse. And the last one was make sure it's a continuous process and involve the other members of the family in the process.
Very important. I concur with all the advice that you've given the attendees today. So thank you. We have 3 minutes to go, and I know that we need to open up the floors for some Q&A. Shiva, I defer to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thanks, Deepak. There is one question which is thoughts on how to separate emotions from venture while planning exits.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Shiva?
So how do you separate yourself emotionally from the ventures while planning exits?
Okay, so it is one of the most difficult, not most difficult, but it's a difficult thing to deal with, is separating your emotions from the business while planning an exit. And the question you got to ask yourself is, what is your long-term objectives? If your long-term objective is to continue to grow and build the company, then you should focus on that and make the necessary changes to do that. If the focus is in running a lifestyle business, generating a very decent income, then that's what you should do. But planning for the exit and making the hard decisions is something you should definitely focus on as soon as possible, rather than deferring those to the end.
Oh, thanks, Deepak. So one question probably on the other experience. What kind of challenges have you faced while you were preparing for exit process?
While I was preparing for the exit process, the biggest or one of the most important recommendations I would have is, when you are going through the exit process, it is not the highest price that you try and seek. It is the surety of close. When you're at the gate and you have several offers, you want to pick the one that you believe will close rather than the highest price. The second thing is, always continue to build a great company, and eventually you will have a good exit.
Okay.
Focus on building enterprise value in the business, and eventually somebody will come make an acquisition.
Oh, thanks, Deepak. That's very good, actually. So there's another question. In the process, when do you involve a bank or advisors for the exit? And how do you choose that?
Sure. One of the things I felt was important was developing relationships with the advisors and the banks. So very early in the process, I developed relationships with the investment bankers, with the banking community, with the M&A community, and met with them on a quarterly basis to let them know how the company was doing, what the company was doing, and get a perspective of the industry from that perspective. So that when we were ready for an exit, we already had those relationships in place. So I think it's important to build those relationships on a continuous basis, rather than waiting at the end and trying to find a banker. While you build these relationships, they can be very beneficial for you in getting an understanding of what the industry is looking for, what the acquirers are looking for, where the markets are going, what is driving valuations. So it becomes a very informative relationship, both with the bankers and the investment community.
Oh, thanks, Deepak, on that. And in general, what is the after exit for founders and VCs or whoever is involved in building that organization?
Well, I'm going to answer the question more from a personal perspective. I'm not sure from the other's perspective. I think what's important is what you want to do personally. From my perspective, I'm someone who cannot sit at home and do nothing. I had another passion, which was real estate. So I went back to school for 2 years, and it was a tremendous amount of fun. And then I found a partner who was smarter than me to go do another venture. And that's what we are doing now with Steel Harbor, which is and I'm having a tremendous amount of fun. So you got to find a passion or a hobby that you're passionate about and go do that. And it could be golf, it could be starting another company, it could be laying on the beach. It just depends on what your personal goals are.
Yeah, and I agree with that. We often find that unknown, what happens after, is something that is left for later on. And that's something that should be understood and discussed with your family and well in advance, because the last thing you want to do is to hit that monumental goal to sell the company, and then you don't know what to do, and that often brings frustration. So putting some time and effort into the advanced thinking around that is very, very important. Thank you, Deepak.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. So since we are coming to the almost end of time right now, so what is your advice in general for the attendees?
Sure. My advice is plan early, involve the family, work with advisors who advisors and attorneys and CPAs who understand what your long-term objectives are, who you know and who have a good performance record, and think about what you want to do after the exit. Think about how you want to give back to the community, because I think it's extremely important in giving back. Think about becoming a mentor. Think about paying it forward in helping other entrepreneurs succeed. And think about those things, because 25 years or 30 years or 50 years from now, it's not going to matter how much money you have in the bank, what car you drove, what house you had. What's going to really matter is whose lives you touched. So I'd encourage you to think about that. Yeah,
thank you, Deepak. That's very, very wise words. Mark, do you want to have a closing statement?
I concur. Some of these conversations that you will need to have with your advisors are important conversations, but they're also very difficult. Involving family is paramount. So thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of showcasing this terrific example.
Thanks, Mark. So normally this is like an in-person event. We provide a small token memento. Because it's virtual, we actually are giving a donation to selected local nonprofits. So thank you, guys. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Jennifer?
Yes, thank you all very much. And we want to again thank some of our sponsors. InnoLab Consulting is our lunch sponsor. Everyone who logs in today to the GovCon events site will receive a Grubhub e-card at the conclusion of the conference via email. Aronson is our virtual platform sponsor. Thank you. Our silver sponsor is Red Cedar Consultancy. Thank you. And we have an announcement for the Tech CE Circle. Is an event of Thai, New Jersey on November 18th at 6 p.m. If you're interested, please go to ticketsnj.tie.org to register.